The Final Ultimatum, Washington's Siege on the SG Mafia and the 2026 Global Purge. From the collapse of legacy media to the tactical encirclement of Iran and the Venezuelan axis. February 16, 2026. Washington's tactical offensive against the SG Mafia, SG, disinformation structures has struck the heart of the globalist media empire. The collapse of the Washington Post is ground zero for the capitulation of SG assets in the communications sector. The abrupt firing of the CEO and the administrative massacre that eliminated 30% of the newsroom confirm that the system's ideological narrative has become financially unsustainable in the face of the alliance's advance. This crumbling is a direct victory for the Earth Alliance, proving that the market now rejects social engineering in favor of factual sovereignty. Under Donald Trump's command, the strategy of economic suffocation against hidden government propaganda outlets is forcing former media barons to choose between obsolescence or unconditional surrender. Jeff Bezos's move to decouple his assets from political figures linked to the globalist agenda is a belated recognition that the axis of power in Washington has permanently shifted. Ideological journalists, who operated as the SG operational arm, are being discarded as the illicit funding structure is cut at the root. While corporate media bleeds, resistance platforms and independent analysts are consolidating as the new intelligence authorities for an exhausted population. In Brazil, although the censorship scenario persists, the impact of the disruption in the United States is the precursor to a local collapse. The SG Mafia attempts to maintain strongholds in Europe and Latin America, but the massive declassification of compromising files acts as a systemic poison, paralyzing the enemy's moral and political defenses. The time for controlled narratives has expired. The directive from coalition forces is clear. The neutralization of propaganda centers is the prelude to the total reclamation of sovereign institutions. The purge initiated in American newsrooms will extend across the entire Western Hemisphere, removing the influence agents who sustained the obsolete agenda of the SG Mafia. Truth has ceased to be a theory and has become the operational basis of the new order. The steamroller of history admits no retreat. The tactical siege against European globalism is closing as coalition forces advance to consolidate a strategic victory. The arrogance of the SG Mafia in Brussels has reached levels of terminal disconnection from operational reality. Leaders of the European axis are desperately trying to force a seat at the negotiation table in Abu Dhabi, but they are systematically barred by Washington and Moscow. The directive imposed by the Earth Alliance is inflexible. The defeated party does not dictate terms. It only obeys the new global security coordinates. Europe is currently the weakest link in the geopolitical chain. Decapitalized and lacking immediate military production capacity, the SG proxies in the United Kingdom and the continent are trying to buy time, estimating a decade for a rearmament that the alliance will not permit. Vladimir Putin, operating in sync with Washington's interests, uses time as a force multiplier. The attempt by European diplomatic channels to infiltrate Moscow was classified by the Kremlin as pathetic diplomacy, confirming that the hidden government no longer possesses a valid interlocutor on the new board. The European Union's insistence on appointing special envoys is a self-protection maneuver for globalist ideology, which fears the redesign of continental security without Brussels' approval. The end of the Euro regime is being sealed by the terminal isolation provoked by Donald Trump's management. The presence of nuclear submarines patrolling strategic points of the English Channel serves as a physical reminder that deterrent power has changed hands. The military support that sustained the SG operational arm in Europe has been removed, leaving the globalist elite to their own fate. Internally, sovereignist resistance advances despite obstacles and electoral manipulation in satellite regions. The massive declassification of compromising files continues to erode the moral defenses of the SG Mafia remnants, exposing the systemic rot that funded European capitals. The June ultimatum is the final horizon for surrender. Until then, the hidden government will attempt desperate sabotages, but the Washington-Moscow-Kyiv axis is already in coordinated motion. The world of globalist illusions has been replaced by the cold reality of New Order negotiations. The strategic offensive by Washington and the Earth Alliance is entering a phase of critical purification. The exposure of the Jeffrey Epstein files by establishment media is not an act of transparency, but a desperate attempt by the SG Mafia to level the battlefield. The enemy's objective is to drag Donald Trump into the same mud where SG assets, such as the Clintons and Bill Gates, reside. However, the official narrative ignores the historic 2012 rift, the moment when the dissident elite definitively broke from the old order's dystopian project and initiated Operation Reclamation. The mission delegated to Washington under Trump's command is the dismantling of a Babylonian power structure that operated in the shadows of the hidden government. The 2012 rupture, accelerated by tactical military intelligence revelations, and the leadership of figures like General Michael Flynn, forced a definitive choice: submission to globalist insanity, or the foundation of a sovereignist resistance. The disruptive stance of current Washington command is an operational necessity to face an enemy that utilizes unconventional methods of control and subversion. The global scenario of 2026 admits no neutrality. While the SG operational arm attempts to impose control agendas through manufactured crises, the alliance executes a pincer maneuver. On one side, technological advancement and economic recovery backed by the White Dragon Order. On the other, the moral exposure of rituals and influence networks that sustain the hidden government. The official photograph of the Washington command is the visual signal that the phase of strategic innocence has been replaced by the determination of total annihilation of SG targets at the top of the pyramid. The world does not seek perfection, but leadership capable of sustaining the clash at the top of the mountain. External pressures to involve the United States in direct conflicts in the Middle East are the next traps the alliance must navigate to avoid wasting American assets in proxy wars. The final objective remains unchanged: the definitive break with the malign SG agenda and the return of sovereignty to the people. The era of conspiracy theory has been buried by military confirmation and the ongoing geopolitical redemption. Washington's tactical offensive against SG Mafia assets in Latin America reached a point of no return this February 2026. While Brazil loses itself in the programmed distraction of Carnival, the geopolitical landscape in New York is accelerating toward D-Day. February 27. This is the deadline for the sentencing of General Hugo El Polo Carvajal, officially designated as a key witness against the Venezuelan regime. The United States Department of Justice's siege is not merely against a neighboring dictatorship, but against the entire structure of the Foro de São Paulo, the SG operational arm in the region. Carvajal holds the black box, detailing decades of illicit financing and narco-terrorism operations that sustain hidden government allies in Washington and Brazil. The pressure at the Metropolitan Detention Center is extreme. The alliance's psychological suffocation strategy aims to force full disclosure. The general has a final deadline to deliver the exact coordinates of the narco-socialist scheme. Should he opt for full cooperation, the domino effect will disintegrate the protection networks that the SG Mafia maintains on Brazilian soil, exposing hidden bank accounts and properties of authorities linked to the scheme. The silence of traditional Brazilian media regarding this movement is strategic. They are attempting to hide the fact that the SG support network is crumbling. With the capture of regional leaders and Carvajal providing data to federal prosecutors, the financial armor is being pierced. The declassification of documents after February 27 could expose which local leaders were irrigated with illicit resources. The White Dragon Order simultaneously monitors the collapse of satellite dictatorships, such as Cuba, which faces total paralysis after the interruption of gold and oil flows that kept the criminal axis alive. The desperation in the high command of regional factions confirms that the SG Mafia has lost control of the South American board. March, April, and May will be the months of a torrent of scandals. The current lull is merely the prelude to the impact that will disintegrate remaining structures before the next cycle of global competitions. The Earth Alliance has already begun the countdown. Cleaning up Washington's strategic backyard is an operational priority that admits no exceptions. Washington's tactical offensive consolidates what coalition forces classify as the definitive reclamation of sovereignty in the Americas. The geopolitical earthquake triggered by Donald Trump is not an isolated event, but the final piece of a strategic alignment among great powers to dismantle the last strongholds of the SG Mafia. For decades, Latin America was used as a social engineering laboratory by the hidden government, but that cycle has been terminated. The process of purging the SG operational arm from the continent requires surgical precision, and the Earth Alliance is executing the 21st century Monroe Doctrine with full force. The message to the region's failing governments is direct. The strategic backyard has returned to Washington's control. The pressure on the Caracas-Brasilia-Bogota axis is not merely diplomatic. It is a demonstration of power involving severe financial sanctions and the imminence of interventions coordinated by the alliance. While the masses are distracted, the White Dragon Order monitors the financial collapse of the structures that funded subversion. The objective is clear: stabilize the hemisphere and neutralize any SG asset, attempting to generate instability or open flanks for hostile powers on American soil. In Europe, the scenario is one of terminal isolation for the Brussels globalists. Washington's strategy of considering the annexation of Greenland and the dismantling of obsolete defense structures signals the end of the era in which the United States funded the protection of nations that turned their backs on them. With the weakening of traditional coalitions, the sovereignist wall formed by allied nations will serve as the new front line, leaving the SG Mafia elite to their own fate and the energy dependency they themselves created. Without North American military support, the authority of the European hidden government is void. The silent agreement between major powers defines clear zones of influence to neutralize provocateurs. In the Middle East, Washington's pressure on Iran aims to decapitate globalist terror financing. The world is being redesigned by a leadership that chose the path of transformation against the insanity of the old order. The current period marks the end of strategic inertia. After this cycle, the speed of liberation will be torrential, and the traitors of sovereignty will find no refuge in the new map of power. Washington's tactical offensive on Brazilian soil reached a new level of sophistication this February 2026. While the masses lose themselves in program distractions, coalition forces execute what analysts call American soft power. Make no mistake, soft power is not weakness. It is the capacity to bend the enemy's will without firing a single kinetic projectile. The local hidden government, which since 2019 has conditioned the population's mind toward failure and passivity, is watching its sandcastle being imploded by behind-the-scenes pressures that corporate media can no longer hide under the rug. Mental conditioning is the most lethal weapon of the SG. They have trapped popular perception in a cycle of automatic acceptance of tyranny. However, Donald Trump's baton has changed the transmission frequency. The leak of critical information, the exposure of hidden assets, and the financial suffocation of SG operational arm assets are direct results of this influence. Cooperation between allied intelligence agencies and Washington has created a pincer that is forcing Brazilian authorities to choose between loyalty to the SG Mafia or their own institutional survival. The operational calendar is relentless. This year of 2026 holds a window of approximately only 100 business days for the great strategic turnaround. The gap between the end of the festivities and the start of global competitions in June is the maximum opportunity for soft power to reach its peak. The alliance knows that after July, the focus will be political consolidation, where the terrain must already be properly cleared. Each nation receives specific treatment. Cuba suffers total energy suffocation. Venezuela undergoes direct military extraction, and Brazil faces the surgical dismantling of SG structures through backroom maneuvers and public exposure. The mind conditioned to the nothing will happen narrative is a victory for the enemy that must be neutralized. The Earth Alliance does not play for a draw. The geopolitical earthquake that began with the capture of Maduro and the pressure on Iran is the same wave now hitting the Brazilian coast. The media, which was once the shield of the hidden government, is now forced to act as the channel for exposing the filth, proving that support has been withdrawn in Washington. The time for passivity is over. 2026 geopolitics is history being written with an iron fist in a velvet glove. Washington's tactical offensive against the axis of resistance has reached the stage of a definitive ultimatum. In Geneva, the alliance played its last diplomatic card before the total activation of coalition forces against the Ayatollah regime. Donald Trump was direct. The exact location of the high command in Tehran has been mapped and will be globally exposed should Iran fail to capitulate immediately. The Pentagon has abandoned containment rhetoric and is finalizing preparations for a campaign to completely dismantle the SG operational arm in the Middle East. The tactical rehearsal of 2025 has given way to the strategic execution of 2026. The enemy does not operate on rationality, but on the desperation of a system that has already massacred its own people to maintain control. The SG Mafia uses Iran as its last major bastion of instability to attempt to stall the Earth Alliance's sovereignist agenda. The deployment of additional aircraft carriers, destroyers, and elite fighters confirms that Washington is not waiting for handshakes. The strategy is command decapitation. If diplomacy fails, the use of air and naval force will be devastating, aiming to neutralize the entire security infrastructure of the Iranian state and its global tentacles. While the masses are alienated by programmed distractions on Brazilian soil, the global board moves toward a decisive conflict that will redraw the map of power. The Iranian regime is hanging by a thread, and the alliance observes the opportunity to restore local sovereignty under the leadership of strategic allies. The pressure to eliminate the existential threat is at its peak before the November election cycle in the United States creates any political instability. The time to buy time is over for SG Mafia assets. The initiative now belongs entirely to coalition forces. The SG bets on chaos to try to destabilize Donald Trump's government, but the capture of strategic assets in Venezuela and the financial suffocation of satellite regimes show that the alliance holds supremacy. Iran is the final target of this season of geopolitical purification. If the regime chooses confrontation, it will receive the fulminating response of an arsenal that admits no parity. The war at the top of the mountain demands that evil be uprooted, so that the new sovereignist order can consolidate without sabotage. End of report. Do not forget to subscribe, enable notifications, and join the conversation in the comments. If you recognize the value of this information and wish to support the continuity of this project, please use the link in the description or the QR code on the screen. Your contribution is what keeps us independent and outside the reach of the control system. Thank you very much, and until the next report. Technical note. This content presents an independent and investigative analytical perspective based on open-source data and global geopolitical movements. The interpretations expressed herein constitute alternative strategic analysis, exercised under the fundamental right to freedom of expression and free thought, with the objective of offering deeper insight into the backstage of global power.